Hey, what's up, YouTube? Redbird and Danny here, back with another New World video. Today, we're going to talk about the Void Gauntlet, everybody's favorite weapon in New World. Where Danny is, he's a Void Gauntlet main, so he'd be able to tell. He's gonna be able to tell us all about it. So, without further ado, Danny, let's hop right in here. Void Gauntlet basics. Now, this is important, I think, off the top, guys. The Void Gauntlet and any other weapon that scales off of two stats scales off of its primary stat. In the Void Gauntlet's case, it is intellect. It scales 90% off of intellect and 65% off of focus. And you'll kind of see why this is so important to know as we kind of look into how the stats are distributed and what would be called diminishing returns, which basically means every time you put a stat in a certain attribute, you're not getting exactly what you got when you put it in, maybe within the first 50 or 100 attribute points. So that's an important thing to remember as we look into these numbers and why they're so different. So first, honestly, Danny, we should look at just a single scaling weapon, such as the Ice Gauntlet. The Ice Gauntlet is a fully scaling int weapon. So you look at these numbers, Danny, here, and what starts to happen is, it looks great. The first 50 attribute points, that's a significant amount. And you hope, man, by the time I get to 300 or 400, I'm going to be doing a butt ton of damage, right, Danny? But it turns out not the case. You get a severe diminishing return as you scale up. So when you start to move up to there, and like I said, that is a 200 difference, 205 difference. But then when you start to move up to 200 and 250 and 300, you're only seeing around a 70 to 80 base damage change, even though you're spending the same amount of attributes. It's important to keep that in mind as we look at these split scaling weapons. And that is why it isn't necessarily ideal to just scale the Void Gauntlet. If you're looking to deal damage, that is, Danny, you do not want to scale the Void Gauntlet strictly off of intellect, especially if it is your primary damage weapon.
Absolutely. So one thing, you mentioned I'm a Void Gauntlet main. I'm a Void Gauntlet main hater, not a lover.
My bad. I missed a word or two in there. I apologize for that.
No, it's okay. My experience, I guess, is exactly the same with the Void Gauntlet. So I have played probably around 1,000 hours either as a tank or a melee player, basically. And it's been very simple. We stick everything into strength and con, and that's it. You try and survive, you try and do a lot of damage. It's obviously very different when it comes to the Void Gauntlet. And my experience very recently is with the musket. So I'm using the musket, which is a split stat, same as the Void Gauntlet. So I put the majority, or what I've been doing anyway, personally, has been 300 into the main stat and then 150 into the second stat. I currently have 0 health. if someone like does a little bit of damage on me, I'm instantly dead. So I think we discussed like the ideal really is to have, or if you want to have as much damage as possible, have that 50. But yeah, absolutely focusing on splitting those statistics because it's your attribute points, because it's extremely important, and that's how you can kind of not avoid, but you can make the most of those diminishing returns.
So let's look a little bit into that right now. So the Void Gauntlet, we did a lot of testing. I constantly manipulated the attributes to try to figure out what the peak damage or the peak base damage was on each of the different con splits. So we tested 0 con, of course, so the big glass cannon build. We tested 0 con, 50 con, 100 con, 150 con, and 200 con. And the reason we did that, I think, is just because a lot of the times you're getting some pretty powerful benefits of hitting these benchmarks within these attributes. And so I did toy around a lot, and there are some windows where you can titrate off of feel, but a lot of times during those windows, you're missing out on one of the main attribute thresholds, which would be like, oh, well, I'm getting 150 con versus 140. That gets you, 15% crit damage reduction. I'm pretty sure you're going to go ahead and put the extra 5 con in, right? And get that crit reduction. Just same with healing. Getting the focus benefit of 150 healing is 20% healing out. So we tested those main thresholds of con, and we also found that most of the time, one of those thresholds of attributes fell into the maximum amount of base damage you could get. So right now, obviously the most extreme build we could do was a 495 to 5 int focus split. The base damage was 1103. And to compare this with the Ice Gauntlet, which is a solely int scaling weapon, the base damage with 495 int was 1227. So you're looking at 120 difference there. But that is basically because, again, the Ice Gauntlet scales 100% off of int, and then the Void Gauntlet only scales 90% off of int. So as we started to kind of find these great thresholds, or the most amount of base damage you could get, it turned out to be in the neighborhood of like a 3-to-2 split. It wasn't always exactly 3-to-2 because, again, we titrated a little bit around in that window of like the most base damage and kind of tried to hit the attributes as well. So 300 and 200 was an 1169 base damage, which is 60. Again, just the difference of moving your stats around. You get an increased amount of damage, even though we went 100% into the primary attribute of the Void Gauntlet. If we went 300 and 200, we ended up getting around 66 more base damage. So I mean, that's telling again that making sure utilizing the difference of the attributes to kind of reduce the amount of diminishing returns you got is extremely important with this weapon. It isn't a ton, but again, you look at getting 200 focus and getting more damage, Danny. I don't think you can avoid that, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, just seeing the numbers side by side is, you got to split those stats. It's mega important.
Yes, and we know the Void Gauntlet, especially in PvP, to be a pretty potent damage weapon. So why not get the most damage out of it as you can? So here's one of the things that we tested. The next thing was 50 con. Reasonable, I think, distribution of attributes. And the reason why I think you should always consider con, Danny, we went through this a little bit before the video, is that con does not have diminishing returns. It turns out that any attribute that you put into con is a very worthy one. It turns out you get in the neighborhood of 1200 health every time that you put 50 attributes into con.
I think at one point we managed to get up to nearly 20,000 health. I think I was on like 19,000 or something. And yeah, make sure if you can, even if you're using the attribute food, I think grab yourself some con attribute food, because if you're going full damage like I've been doing with my musket, if you a little bit of damage, you're gonna hurt. So if you can get at least 50 con, that's a great place to start. And if you can use attribute food as well, then win-win, really. Definitely get some con.
Yep. And it's one of those things that if you're gonna have 40 con or 25 con, you just have 50 con, you will get health consumables are 20% stronger. So then you're talking about, your health potions give 20% more health, and that's just something you do not want to give up, especially in PvP. And obviously, when you're in PvE with the Void Gauntlet, we'll start to see maybe you don't even need any con, because you just are blowing things away with a ton of self healing. It's pretty nuts. So the ideal split for the 50 con was 305, 150. That gave you a base damage of 1117. Only a 52% base damage difference, but you get the 50 con. You get the 20% increase to consumables. You get 1,200 extra hit points, Danny. So definitely something you want to look at as you're kind of trying to pull out the most damage possible. And again, you can't deal damage if you're dead. You do need a little con.
If you're working on the group fights as well, and you find yourself being in the middle of everyone, pump that up to 100, and then you're going to be unbelievable. Con is not to be shied at. It's definitely worth making sure you have some. Minimum of 50 we're going to recommend.
Yeah, I run 200 con on my mage builds as well, just because, again, you're trying to get the most out of your attributes, and there is no diminishing return in con, and it's just very, very powerful stat, I think, across the board. But if I was in your chat, Danny, as an ice spike user, I would have tried to deter you from putting any con in, because there's no better feeling to me than one-shotting someone with the ice spike.
I got my emotes. People are using them on me now. I've been getting spiked like all the time. It's frustrating.
Yes, the legendary spike emote. Yeah. So the next thing we tested was 100 con, and again, these are pretty big. I mean, not like extremely powerful, but 10% more health per physical armor. If you're in medium or heavy armor, you're usually going to get around 100, 100, 150 extra hit points there just from hitting that threshold. You just as well do that. That's like 10% of what you typically get across, the attribute spending. We still got a base damage of 1,055, only about 100 difference from running zero con. Base damage, but then you have 2,400 extra hit points. It ends up being around 2,500, give or take, because of the threshold bonus of con. So again, another very strong stat choice there, Danny. Moving on, we did try 150, of course. We did a 205 to 150 split. We got 985 damage, base damage. So you're starting to get in that neighborhood. Whereas if you're trying to do a lot of damage, now we're starting to fall away from about a 200% base damage decrease from, of course, the classic 300-200 split.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because I know a lot of people want to go just full damage.
Yep.
And I think all of this is really dependent on your scenario. So, for example, if I was running Ice Void and you're running Fire Ice, we potentially don't need all the damage because we could work together. We could work together to attack a particular person, and then our damage becomes more than enough anyway. So I think the info that we're giving you guys is a lot of it's just on the base as well. So we're not taking into consideration the perks and all the extras. But it's all about the way you play and your play style as well. So
yes,
you may not need full damage, you may not need full glass cannon, and 900 base damage could be enough. If there's two of you running around together a lot, you can just focus one person, quickly kill them, and then focus the next person. And fantastic. So I think a lot of this depends on your own play style as well.
And that's a great point, because one of the division of stats that brings up the most interesting conversation when it comes to the difference between PvP and PvE, because at 150 con, you are getting the 10% reduction to crit damage. And in PvP, and the idea behind putting resilience, that's why resilient is probably the best in slot perk in PvP armor, is because normalizing the damage spike of a crit in PvP, allowing you to survive those crits and be able to, regulate the damage you're taking at a given point is pretty significant. And then you're getting 10% more help from the 150 con thing. So when in PvP, I think this is something viable, like you said, to look at for survivability and managing those crits. But in PvE, man, the crit resistance is almost worthless. So then you start to think, well, if I can do more damage and more self-healing, then maybe I want to look at something different. So the 150 thing is not necessarily, I would say, like the all-around choice. But in PvP, when you start to look at the crit resistance, and then obviously, again, no diminishing return with con here, Danny. So the difference between 100 and 150 is still 1,200 more hit points. And then at this point, we've accumulated, if we're doing just glass cannon 300-200, we've accumulated 3,600 extra hit points from the zero con build. So again, PvP wise, this starts to look pretty powerful.
Yep. And I think a lot of our team, we all run normally about a minimum 150 con when we're doing some kind of serious PvP. Because you're working together, you're working with a team. So, like you said, Shattered Mountain, 0 if you want.
Yeah.
Void focus, but in PvP, definitely look to push up to the 150 if you can. If you don't mind dropping some of that damage away, it's a good idea. Yeah.
So here's the last one we tested, because obviously, if you start to put 250, 300 con in and you're a damage dealer, I don't think you're doing it. Necessarily correct. But the thing, we did test 200 con. You're getting a 200-100 split, and that was 920 base damage. So just 65 less than the 150. You do get access to, I think, one of the more powerful attribute threshold perks, and 20% increased armor. Danny, that is a massive. That's the reason I run 200 con on my mage, because I do medium armor, and I feel like that is a significant boost to survivability. Again, you would probably only consider this in PvP as a damage dealer, but then you start to question, because am I dealing as much damage as I need to deal? Because I think a lot of the strength in the Void Gauntlet is the Void Blade, the spike damage that the Void Blade can provide. And if you can't finish someone off quickly, which means basically in around 2 to 3 seconds, depending on, what the health of your enemy is at when you scream at them, then, then I don't think you're playing the Void Gauntlet correctly, because that's where the strength of it lies, is I want to scream and kill someone before they can even get unrooted, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, So just in comparison here, 300 int, 200 con on an ice gauntlet build or a fire staff build, you're getting 986 base damage.
Yeah, I was just laughing a second ago because you mentioned about the scream. I just have these visions of me running around as a great axe and someone screaming me in the Void Gauntlet. I just panic and I try and charge away. And it's like, nope, you're gone, Dan.
No,
you're absolutely right. You know, get in with the Void Gauntlet, Ice Gauntlet combo at the moment, especially even just the Void Gauntlet. Yeah, it's all about kind of that instant burst damage and
you're a rogue essentially. You know, you're trying to stun lock someone and kill them before they can get unstunned. So in this case, in New World, it's root. You know, you're trying to get root somebody. Yeah. So but yeah, so interesting things. I think, you know, we kind of have two real, like, I think glaring strength in these two builds. If we're going to recommend some of these things to you guys in PVE, I would say you want at least 100 con. That will help you avoid any of the like really big spike damage mobs if you're trying to solo things like elites and stuff like that. You can kind of just keep you out of those sticky situations. So 255, 150, 100 con is what we would recommend in a PvE situation. If you're more skilled with dodging and knowing the mechanics of your enemies, you can go down to 0 con in PvE. It just based off of your skill and your knowledge of how these people attack. And then in the con department, in PvP, 150 is always like the benchmark there. If you don't feel like you're getting enough damage, move down to 100, move down to 50.
Yep, no, for sure. And I was going to say one thing we haven't really touched on is kind of light versus heavy. I know people still run this on medium, but you mentioned about, you know, if you're really confident with dodging and things, I think, yeah, you could, especially in PvE, definitely drop the con down to practically 0. And even for PvP, maybe not so much in the wars, because the wars are a little bit wild and there's a lot going on and there's a lot of people, but maybe some of the smaller scale PvP, if you're really confident and you're a great PvPer, even, you know, having little to 0 con could also work in your favor. But again, that's, like you mentioned, it's down to you as an individual and how confident of a player you are and what you can foresee coming your way.
Right. So if you're taking anything away from this, remember the 3-2 stat split. Ideally, you want to hit your thresholds. So make sure you're using some focus. If you're a damage dealer, you still need focus. I know it's a healing stat, but with the Void Gauntlet, guys, it is a little bit more than that. It can definitely help you pump out more damage. And then again, just make sure, you know, utilize your con as you can. If you don't like as much health and you do want to deal more damage, you can do less. But remember, there is no diminishing returns in con. So as you're building out your builds, and me and Danny are working on build videos right now for you guys for different parts of New World. Con is a really important stat, and it's one that you don't ever get you know, less from as you put more in. So you always want to look at that attribute. But you know, if you want to go to town in Shattered Mountain with 0 con, be my guest, man. I did it for a long time. It was a ton of fun, and you just destroy elites. It's nuts.
Love it.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the subscription button, and we'll see you in the next video.